Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here once again is in my garage shop where tonight it's raining and a siren just went off. Anything can happen. Anyway, the reason why we're doing this video today is to finally talk about the Shopsmith Jigsaw as I gesture to a Taiwanese copy of a Shopsmith Jigsaw. Yeah, a little bit of back history. The company that originated the Shopsmith line of tools was a company called Magna Engineering back in the 1940s. In the 1940s, they had a jigsaw that mounted on that earliest 5-in-1 machine. Now, it was unusual in that it bolted on top of the machine, and then you used the table, the same table you would use for the table saw function, the lathe, or the drill press and such. In the mid-50s, they introduced what this saw was a copy of. And that saw sold, yeah, there was a break in the late 60s. But anyway, that saw sold until the late 1980s when the scroll saw was introduced. And I mean, there were tens of thousands of them produced by all of the various manufacturers of the Shopsmith line of tools. Now, it does far more than just being a jigsaw. So we're going to break this down into a couple videos. In this video, I'm going to show you the basic setup. We're going to talk about some things that you must know to keep this saw from disintegrating and basic use. We'll then do our midweek follow-up, asking any questions that you have about this video. And then in the coming weekend, I'm going to show you some functions of this machine that I think make it worth having in your stable. So let's just start with the basics and we'll go from there. So I came here this weekend to shoot a video on this jigsaw and only to find out that it was missing some parts. I thought it was new. It was new old stock. It came with this old machine that's back in the corner, but it doesn't matter if it's never been used. It's missing some pieces and parts. So I went back to my shop and I grabbed this one. This one I also have never operated, but it appeared to be complete. In either case, if you have one of these that you've not used in a while or ever used, there are a few things that you're going to want to go over. The first one, and I've mentioned it already, is there is an oil bath at the bottom that has to have oil. When Shopsmith produced this saw, when Total Shop imported this saw, it did not have oil in it. And there was a sticker on there or a piece of paper or something to tell you, you need to add oil. I can't tell you how many people damage this machine right out of the chute without putting oil in it. So what we have inside of this machine, we have a shaft that spins, and it's spinning a eccentric cam. It's called a wheel, spinning a little wheel, and that wheel is down inside of that oil bath. There's a shaft on that wheel that goes around and around and around. That shaft then has to convert that rotary action into our vertical stroke, the up and down action. And it does that with a little linkage between the up and down and the round and round, a little plastic part. And that plastic part has to be kept in oil. If you don't oil that, it will melt. Now, I really have no idea if Shopsmith still supports that, but I do know that there are people that are 3D printing them, and actually they're not difficult to make. If you get yourself some ultra high molecular weight plastic, like a piece of a white cutting board, you can cut it and drill 2 holes and you're back in business. So we're now looking at the side that is normally powered by the Shopsmith headstock. And to add oil to the oil bath, we need to take this nameplate off, this little name badge. And we'll do that by removing the 2 screws that mount it in place. You notice that this name badge has never had this protective plastic removed from it. Should we risk it? See if this takes off the printing. There we go. Now we can see all the destructions. All right, inside of here we have got a bolt. I didn't expect it to be a bolt. I expected it to be a bolt with a slot in it. That is a hex bolt. So now I got to get a wrench out to remove that. The amount of oil we're going to add to this, we're going to add it to the point where the oil begins to want to run out of the oil bath. Whoops, we lost power. This is a couple ounces of oil. Whoa, there we go. It would appear we have plenty of oil now. Let's go ahead and plug it off. All right, then we'll put our label back on. So to proceed, I'm going to go ahead and take the table off, give you a better view of what's happening here. The table comes off just like the strip sander table came off. We've got a washer, a spring, and a knob, and that holds tension against that trunnion. Set these right here. Now you can see what's happening as this is being powered by our headstock or by a stand. It's driving this shaft up and down, and this could be cleaned off and lubricated as well. Really need is some WD-40 to clean this up, and that has been packed. We'll add a little bit of oil here. Got to keep in mind that this is going to be exposed to sawdust, so we don't really want a lot of oil there. All right, so here's our lower chuck, and the lower chuck is going to hold our blade, and these blades are available in lots of different sizes. Here's one that's about 1/4 inch wide. This one's pretty aggressive. It wouldn't be great for making jigsaw puzzles, but this is going to go down inside the chuck. The chuck then is going to grip this. Now, how far do you put that in? Well, 1/4 to 1/2 inch. It really depends upon how big of a piece are you going to be cutting. Now we're going to tighten this. Got to find the right hex wrench to fit it. Here we go. You'll also notice in this case there's a kind of a plastic rod rubbing up against the back of this. Shopsmith's was, I don't think it was fiberglass, but all this is just there to support the back of the blade. I've seen folks that have just used a wooden dowel to do that. So you're going to, if you loosen this knob, this whole assembly can drop down. We've got no tension at all on the blade. And we're going to insert that into, there we go. I'm just going to hold this in place temporarily, and we'll add a little bit of tension onto the set screw, cap screw. So right now, that blade is under no tension at all. As soon as I loosen this knob and lift up on this portion, I'm loading a spring. There's a spring on the end of this shaft up inside of that tube. And by lifting this, I am now applying tension, and that tensions the blade here. Now, the big question has always been, well, how much tension do you add? The wider the blade, the less tension you actually need. Thin blades need a lot more tension. But it's just a matter of practice, unfortunately, to determine what the best tension would be. Now, there's a little bit more going on here. We've got a hold down foot or shoe, which is just a little spring. And we can adjust that a little bit by turning this knob, and you'll notice that allows us to pivot it if we're going to tilt our table. It even lets us slide it side to side a little bit to make sure that we've got the blade centered within those two little hold down feet. Additionally, we have two set screws here. Those should be adjusted with your 5/32 hex wrench. They are. One of these allows us to move this entire assembly in and out, and that allows us to put the larger tube up against the back of the blade. So that large tube is going to act as a backup for the blade. And then the small tube can be brought up and can straddle the blade and can be used as almost like blade guides on a bandsaw. It works something like that. All right. Ooh, that's a fair amount of tension on that spring. I may have too much tension. We might have to start that out with a little less tension on it and see how the machine operates. Let's go ahead and plug this in and we'll power it, see what happens. Anything could happen at this point. Oh, and that's right. Dang you, Total Shop. Their couplings are just the opposite of the Shopsmith couplings. Thought I was dead in the water until I remembered, oh, I have a Total Shop coupling and a drive hub. So we're back in business. Yeah, theirs is just the opposite of the Shopsmith with the spline configuration. All right, we want to make sure that we get the speed down a bit. Let's do that first. Here we go. So I'm going to go with a much smaller blade. This is a jigsaw blade sold by Shopsmith, and we'll see how this one behaves. I mean, if we're going to do this, let's do this. Blade goes into the chuck. It's positioned against the back of the chuck, and then you tighten it up. Bring that down a little bit here. Bring that in. And now we'll raise that up. That again is loading spring tension on that blade. You'll notice that I need to back that tube off because it is totally covering that blade. That's just going to wear that blade out. Got to have it behind the gullets. All right, here's some 1/4 inch pine. Shouldn't be a problem to do that. I typically would bring the board around to the back and lower the hold down onto that. Tighten it up there. Pretty clean cuts. Very simple. Now let's add a little bit more tension to this and see if this blade can cut something a little heavier. Here's that white oak board. Oh, sorry, that's so washed out. Here's that white oak board we were using with the dado blade. So down on this end, it's about a 1/2 inch or so thick. Let's see if it'll cut that. Okay, did you notice the galloping that was going on? The galloping is where the cam on the bottom is pushing the blade up faster than the spring can lift. And this is the problem that we have with the jigsaw that the scroll saw solved. The fact that the scroll saw blade is under constant tension, both up and down. So that's the challenge we have with the jigsaw. It did a fine job, though, cutting that stock. Now, another question you might have is, well, what other maintenance is involved? We know we need to keep the oil bath filled. There is a blower. You can see there's kind of a clear hose back here that's puffing air through that tube that is acting as our backup. That needs to be oiled occasionally. Basically, there's a leather sucker in here, kind of like a leather pump or kind of like a hand pump. And so we need to occasionally pull the top off of this. And we do that by removing these 4 screws. Now this is just a protective cover. These screws aren't holding anything down. There's like no spring going to explode or anything as we take this lid off. You've got 4 screws and machine screws. Each one of those has a washer underneath it, a split washer. And with those off, we have access to the top of this, and we can go ahead and add some oil. If I remove the tension and bring this down, you can see the top of that shaft where the blade chuck is installed, and there is that leather sucker, and we can just give this an occasional drop or two of oil. Not so much that it's going to go squirting out everywhere as you're using the saw. Put the tension back on, cycle that a few times, and we are good to go. Now, there is another neat trick we can do with this jigsaw. The scroll saw is operated from here, from the side of the machine, same as the headstock. I can turn it off and on, adjust the speed. I can configure this jigsaw to do exactly the same thing. If I would rather work from here, I can. Eventually, though, 18 inches away, I could run into this arm. So to me, an advantage of operating it from this end of the machine is not only do I have unlimited capacity on the length of my pieces, I can even use my main table to catch stock if I'm cutting long pieces. But you have that option. It's just a matter of loosening the collet or the chuck on the bottom and rotating it 90 degrees. The upper one, what we do is we have to take this adjustable hold down out, and that happens by removing the table, and we put it at another position, and then we rotate the entire head. Let's just do it. Let's do it. We're gonna do it right now. Let's just do it. So we'll take the table off. Gotta take the blade off. Gotta take the tension off. Rotate our collet around. You do that with a 5/32 set screw that's at the back bottom. And I need to take this backup off for this. It's just going to be in the way if I leave it there anyway. Set that aside. And now we will move the collet around 90 degrees. Lock that in. We can take this, and we may have to remove that. Yeah, we do. Take the screw off the bottom of that, or the nut off the bottom of that foot. Drop that out of the way. It's held up by that hose. And now we're going to bring this around over to this side, where there is a hole. Then this whole thing drops down, rotates, and slides back up. You can see how this hold down arm is part of what helps to guide the tensioning tube. I'm just making words up here, guys. Definitely refer to the manual, which you can download at vintagemachinery.com. Probably also on the Shopsmith Facebook group. And with that, we are ready to cut from this side of the saw. Hold down foot came loose. There you go, 3/4 inch white oak. So imagine in that configuration, maybe I'm cutting long stock, maybe cutting the end of something. I can support that from the side. Choice is yours. Now, everything I've shown you, I'm showing you with a Taiwanese clone. The Shopsmith jigsaw is so much better. Fit, finish, function, everything about it you're going to like. But you could actually get by with one of these. So we're going to answer your questions, comments, and sheep shots in the midweek follow-up. But this coming weekend, I'm going to show you some neat out-of-the-box things you can do with this that, let's say you already own a scroll saw. You're still going to want to have one of these. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for all my channel members who make our midweek videos possible, and make it a great week.